The wind came down off the high plains that October like a judgment nobody asked for, rattling the loose tin on the feed store and driving dust through the cracks of every house on the south end of Dry Wells, population 412, soon to be 411. Folks said later they felt the change in the air before they heard the first scream, the way cattle feel thunder long before the storm arrives. By dusk the sky had turned the color of a healing bruise, and the only light left in town came from the single bulb above the porch of the Coldwater Ranch, 3 miles out where the road gives up and the sagebrush begins. Silas Coldwater stood on that porch with his hat in his hands, staring at the woman who had just stepped out of the dark. She was small, barefoot, dressed in a man's work shirt that hung to her knees, and her hair was the black of fresh oil. No one in Dry Wells had ever seen her before, yet every soul who laid eyes on her that night swore they recognized something in her face, something that made the back of the neck go cold. She was bleeding from a cut above her eye, but the blood looked wrong, too thick, almost blue in the yellow bulb light. Silas was 62, thick in the shoulders, thin everywhere else, a man who had buried a wife and 2 sons and still got up before dawn to mend fence. He did not speak at first. He only looked at the woman, then past her to the empty road, then back again. When she finally opened her mouth, her voice came out soft as a confession in an empty church. "That is forbidden," she whispered, pointing one trembling finger toward the north pasture where the cottonwoods grew in a crooked line along the dry creek. "What you keep there, that is forbidden." Silas felt the words land inside his chest like a .45 slug. He knew exactly what she meant. Every rancher within 50 miles knew, even if nobody ever said it out loud. The north pasture had been shut since 1958, the year the creek quit running and the grass turned silver overnight. The gate was chained, the chain was padlocked, and the padlock had never once been opened in 67 years. Folks told stories about lights moving out there after midnight, about cattle found with their eyes milk-white and their tongues cut out. Children dared each other to walk the fence line on the first frost, then ran home crying because something walked behind them that had no shadow. Silas had always told himself the stories were wind and loneliness. He was a practical man. He paid his taxes, went to church when the preacher guilted him hard enough, and never wasted whiskey on regret. But the woman's whisper cracked him open the way lightning splits an oak. He understood, bone deep, that whatever she had seen in the north pasture was not a story anymore. He took one step toward her. "Who are you?" he asked, voice rough as burlap. She only shook her head, and the blood from her cut dripped onto his porch boards and hissed where it landed, like water on hot iron. Then she turned and walked back into the dark, barefoot across the gravel, and disappeared between the sagebrush before Silas could find the will to follow. He stood there a long time. Long enough for the bulb above him to flicker and die. Long enough for the temperature to drop 20 degrees and the stars to come out sharp as broken glass. Then he went inside, took the shotgun off the rack, and pulled a rusted key from a tin box behind the flour. The key was black with age and shaped like a crooked cross. He had never touched it before, not once, though he had known it was there since the day his father pressed the tin box into his 12-year-old hands and said, "Some doors stay shut, son. That's how we keep breathing." Silas walked to the barn, saddled his oldest mare because she didn't spook easy, and rode north under a moon the color of spoiled milk. The chain on the gate was so old it crumbled when he slid the key home. The padlock fell apart like it had been waiting all these years for someone stupid or brave enough to turn it. The gate swung open with a scream of hinges that carried clear to town. Inside the pasture the grass stood waist-high and perfectly still, as though the wind itself was afraid to enter. At the far end, where the cottonwoods grew thickest, a single lantern burned with a blue flame that gave off no heat. Silas rode toward it slow as regret. The mare's ears flattened. Her breath steamed though the night was warm again, suddenly, wrongfully warm. Beneath the trees stood the woman. She was no longer bleeding. She was no longer small. She stood 10 feet tall if she stood an inch, her shadow stretching back toward the open gate like spilled ink. Her eyes were the same blue as the lantern flame, and when she smiled there were too many teeth. Silas raised the shotgun but did not fire. He could not. His hands remembered something his mind had spent a lifetime forgetting. "You opened the door," the woman said, and her voice was the sound of every grave in the county opening at once. "Now they all get to come home." Behind her the ground bulged and split. Pale hands pushed up through the silver grass, hands that wore wedding rings and class rings and the tarnished star of a deputy who disappeared in 1973. The dead of dry wells rose slow and dripping creek mud, their mouths sewn shut with barbed wire, their eyes wide and pleading. They turned as one toward the distant glow of the town. Silas finally found his voice. "I didn't know," he said. "My daddy said keep it shut. He never told me why." "Your daddy knew," the woman answered. "Every firstborn Coldwater knows. The land was never yours to keep. It was borrowed. And interest is due." The first of the dead stepped past Silas, heading for the road. More followed. Dozens. Hundreds. The population of dry wells walking home after 67 years under the cottonwoods, carrying with them the smell of turned earth and old blood. Silas watched them go. He did not try to stop them. There was no point. He had opened the door, and some doors, once opened, do not close again. By midnight the screaming started in town. By 3 a.m. the screaming stopped, replaced by a silence heavier than any sound. When the sun came up red and ugly over the plains, the only living soul left within 10 miles was Silas Coldwater, sitting on his porch with an empty shotgun across his knees and a rusted key in his open palm. Folks from the next county found him 3 days later. He hadn't moved. He hadn't blinked. He just kept saying the same words over and over, soft as a prayer, terrible as a curse. "That is forbidden," he whispered to the empty air. "That is forbidden." If you felt that chill crawl up your spine, if you heard the gate scream in your head while you read, then you know this story isn't finished. The dead are still walking somewhere tonight, and some doors are still waiting for the chapter 2, the town that wasn't there anymore. 3 days after the dead walked home, the state police rolled into what used to be dry wells and found one old man rocking on a porch, 411 empty houses, and no bodies. Not one. Doors hung open, coffee still steamed in cups, a pie cooled on Mrs. Delgado's windowsill, but every mirror was shattered and every Bible lay open to the same page, Revelation 20 verse 13. The sea gave up its dead. Silas Coldwater sat staring at the north pasture gate swinging in a wind nobody felt. When they asked where everyone went he only whispered, "They went to settle up," and refused to say more. The troopers chained the gate, posted "No trespassing" signs, and left Silas in the care of a county nurse who lasted exactly one night. She fled at 2:17 a.m. screaming about footsteps on the roof that matched her own heartbeat. By morning the signs were gone, the chain lay in pieces, and Silas was walking the streets calling names no living person answered. That was when the videos started appearing online. Grainy phone footage, always filmed from a moving car at twilight, a perfect little town with lights in every window, children chasing a dog down a street that hadn't existed since the dead rose. The clip ends with a woman in a blood-stained work shirt standing in the middle of the road, 10 feet tall, smiling with too many teeth. The caption always reads the same, "Come home. We're waiting." The first kids arrived on a dare. 4 teenagers from Laramie, drunk on cheap vodka and bravado, drove out with a GoPro and a plan to spend the night in the ghost town. Their live stream cut to static at 11:58 p.m. The last thing the camera caught was the tall woman leaning down until her face filled the lens. She whispered, soft as a lullaby, "That is forbidden," and every viewer watching live felt their screen go ice cold. Next morning the car sat in the middle of Main Street, engine running, doors locked from the inside, keys still in the ignition. No kids. Just 4 neat piles of clothes on the seats and a new video uploaded from their own channel, the teenagers, pale and smiling, standing beneath the cottonwoods with barbed wire stitched through their lips, waving at the camera like beauty queens. After that the pilgrims came. Not sightseers, pilgrims. People who had lost someone in dry wells years ago, decades ago, lifetimes ago. They came alone or in pairs, carrying flowers, photographs, guilt. None ever left. Their cars stayed parked in perfect rows along the street that wasn't supposed to be there anymore, engines cold, doors unlocked, shoes lined up on dashboards like offerings. Next pair of hands stupid or brave enough to turn the key. Hit that subscribe button right now and ring the bell, because next week we open another door you were never meant to see behind. You won't sleep, but you won't look away either. The end story.